So who are some of the biggest names to look out for when it comes to trades?
The two big ones that I think could happen in the next couple of weeks. First is Arizona Cardinals wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins.
Right.
I think it's fairly clear he does not want to be there. It also just makes sense for Arizona at this point to flush the entire thing and start over. The fascinating thing there will be, does he push for a new contract? He said on the Pat McAfee show this week he doesn't necessarily need a new deal. My guess is he just wants his money guaranteed, which I think is more palatable for a team than giving him, like the deal he got going to Arizona, where he got a big signing bonus and got, new cash flow. If he just wants guarantees, I think a team will give up a second-round pick, maybe a day 3 pick as well, and he could be on a new team very soon. The second is Los Angeles Rams corner Jalen Ramsey. Look, they've made it very clear they are kind of resetting there. It was also notable, beyond the moves they've made, it's notable that Les Snead comes out yesterday and says, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Donald, and Cooper Kupp are building blocks and foundational players we do not want to move on from. Never mentioned Jalen Ramsey's name at any point in that press conference. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's on a new team also in the next week or two. I think you'll see maybe Miami get in the conversation, maybe Detroit. Those two teams probably where I'm keeping an eye on is maybe adding Jalen Ramsey in the near future.
We've spent so long thinking of the DeAndre Hopkins contract as this like crazy outlier deal that he signed when he went to Arizona, and a thing that was causing problems in the NFL because everybody else didn't want to go there. What is it like now? Like, we're a few years into this deal. How egregious is this contract? What kind of state is it for any team looking to potentially bring him in? Because obviously it was a problem for so many years, but have we reached the point in the deal where it's actually not a bad contract anymore?
Yeah, no, it's really not. It's really not. I think it's more a question of just the assurances you can add to it. Do you want to guarantee a bunch of money? The value itself, though, is in my opinion, is fine based on where the play has been. I know he obviously had the suspension and missed some time with injury the year before that. But you saw when he did come back. Hopkins was getting peppered with 15 targets a game. He is still clearly a number one receiver, a true outside X. Which also there's none of that in free agency, and there's none of that in the draft. So that can maybe boost his value a little bit. There's only one option realistically. Maybe a guy like a T. Higgins, that's way down the road. But yes, it's 2 years, about $34 million remaining. I have no issue bringing that in and guaranteeing a lot of it, if not all of it. Like I said, if he wants new cash on top of that, then it complicates things. But yeah, I think that's fine.
So you bring up a good point, because wide receiver is like the biggest problem spot, I think, this offseason for a lot of teams. There isn't any of those guys in free agency, like these true number one X alpha type receivers. It's being like, that's the reason people are criticizing the group in the draft as well, as it's pretty low on those guys. There are good receivers available. There aren't many that look like they can come in and be that guy. So obviously DeAndre Hopkins is an obvious kind of trade candidate, and a guy that teams needing that type of receiver would be interested in. Brandon Cooks, I know, is another name that you have listed there. I think we can probably take it as read that Brandon Cooks is always on the trade block. But I would be interested in a couple of younger guys that might not technically be available, but let's see, right? Like, I know the Bengals have been talking like T. Higgins is a part of their long-term vision, their future plan. They're going to lock up him, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, all these guys to monster contracts, keep that nucleus intact. And they've sort of said, he's a Cincinnati Bengal, he's not available, right? But if you're a team, like if you're the Giants, and let's say DeAndre Hopkins goes somewhere else or you don't get him or whatever, you still need that elite receiver. You've got an acute need at receiver, and you've got money to spend. They should be picking up the phone and testing Cincinnati's resolve with an offer. Like, I know you said T. Higgins wasn't available, but if I gave you a first-round draft pick, which would be an upgrade, like a profit on what you drafted him for, is he still not available? Or, are we talking now?
I think it's interesting, too, the most relevant example, sort of relevant, like with Stephon Diggs, where it helped that the Vikings probably thought, yeah, we can add a replacement immediately at pick 22 and Justin Jefferson. I'm not saying they knew he was going to become the best receiver in the NFL, but whereas this class is not particularly good, the Lions pick is at 18. But the thing with Higgins is, look, I don't think it's going to happen early. I think it would happen later in the offseason. The reason I put on an article, I think their GM or pseudo-GM, Duke Tobin, basically was calling me out at his podium in the Combine for mentioning it. I don't think they're going to trade him. What I think is going to happen, though, is they're not going to extend him at any point this offseason. And as we saw last year with A.J. Brown and Deebo Samuel, a trade request I think like I would bet on a trade request happening, maybe not betting on a trade happening, because the Cincinnati Bengals, they don't really do business that way. They'll probably keep him. They'll then franchise tag him next offseason if they have to. So, I get why everyone's pushing back on me and saying, but look, the Bengals paying all three of those guys, I just don't think it's a very likely proposition. So it's going to be interesting.
But this feels like a classic example of like, I don't want to trade him, but if somebody comes in with an offer like that's pretty crazy, I can't really afford to turn it down. You know what I mean? Like it seems like the kind of thing where your opinion could be changed depending on what gets thrown in your direction. And if you're a team like the Giants, I think you could throw a pretty big offer towards Cincinnati for T. Higgins and it be entirely reasonable in terms of what you would want to give up and get that guy. Like I think so. It's people have a tendency to believe everything that NFL teams say right now. I don't even think they're lying. Like they're saying, no, he's not available for trade. But if somebody picks up the phone and says, hey, we'll give you a first round pick, we'll pick up the contract, we'll, give him the giant payday, and maybe there's some other bells and whistles attached to this as well. Is he still unavailable? You'd kind of be crazy to turn that down at this point.
I think that's a key, too. We're talking about how bad the market is in free agency and the draft, which should, in theory, raise the compensation. Like, hey, if you're Cincinnati, say, okay, you know what? The only way we're even going to listen and entertain the idea is if you blow us out of the water with an offer. And it's fair for them to say that, right? So if the Giants offer like their first this year at 26, but then a future second, I don't think they're not going to go two firsts if I had to guess. But still, a first and a future second, and it's coming from New York, who, that could be a top 50 pick next year with some regression for them. That's right. If you're Cincinnati, again, they could decline it, but make it a hard decision.
And unlike Minnesota, who had to sort of factor in, can we replace this guy like for like in the draft, blah blah blah. Like they already have Jamar Chase. Sure, losing T. Higgins isn't good, but it's not like you get rid of him for whatever the trade is, and now you got to go and spend a first round pick on a wide receiver just to get back to being viable. Like they could let him walk and be fine. Like Jamar Chase plus Tyler Boyd plus whoever the hell else they add during the offseason just for fun is still good. It's not the same sort of dynamic. And, similar vein, the other guy I would be picking up the phone to inquire about is Brandon Aiyuk from the 49ers. I think Steve brought this up a while ago as a sort of just a light bulb going off kind of moment. And it makes a lot of sense to me because similarly, the 49ers are not going to be able to pay everybody. They've got this maybe the greatest array of playmaking talent that the game has seen, like in one place. They've got, George Kittle, Brandon Aiyuk, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey added to the mix now. Kyle Juszczyk is a fullback. Like, it's absurd. They're not going to be able to keep all of those guys. They just traded for Christian McCaffrey, so that's, sort of one of the big pieces. I would imagine they're more keen on keeping Deebo than they are Aiyuk. So I would be picking up the phone and saying, hey, does this pick get us Brandon Aiyuk?
I totally agree with you there. I mean, Nick Bosa is going to get $32, $33 million a year. Like, you have all these contracts coming in. Yes, they're cheap at quarterback, which helps, really everything else. But I'll throw one more at you, too. I would rather have T. Higgins or Brandon Aiyuk than this guy. But can the Bills pay Gabriel Davis this offseason either? Oh. I don't know. And he's another guy going to the last year of his deal because he's not a first-round pick. I'm sure he's asking for, number two money, probably not $20 million, but close to it. Can they pay that to him? I don't know.
Yeah. One last point with the Bengals and T. Higgins thing. We talked before about, cash poor owners, and that's one of the things potentially as a hurdle for Lamar Jackson, et cetera. Somebody might have to put $230 million in an escrow account. Do the Bengals have the money to pay those three guys in the space of 18 months?
That's my thing. Like, it's about escrow, where if the guys are going to take deals that don't, and the Bengals historically, outside of quarterback, because, the Steelers, the Packers, they always have to bend on quarterback, but they do not guarantee money outside the first year of the contract. Now, I always like to say this. We do look at the retention rate of all players, and the Bengals and Steelers and Packers are also top three in. They actually honor their contracts longer than any other team. So there is, they obviously, but anyway, when you don't guarantee money outside the first year of a deal for a guy like T. Higgins, who could be pushing for, full guarantees in year three, the day he signs, with more potentially vesting later on, like, some team would give him that, and they're trying to say, yeah, we'll give you a big signing bonus, but nothing beyond that is guaranteed. Like, that's not what he's looking for. So The escrow thing is a real problem for Mike Brown. I know every time I bring this now, oh, he has Paycor Stadium. They got a sponsorship deal. That's not going to help you pay three guys $100 million combined per season. But
Right.
yeah, I think it's a legit concern. And also, look, like Trey Hendrickson's deal is way too cheap. He deserves more money. DJ Reader's coming into, I think, the last year of his deal. Mike Hilton, Chidobe Awuzie, they also have a lot of other, they're going to lose Jesse Bates, yada, 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 yada. So they have a lot coming in their way. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, forget, salary cap constraints. It's going to be difficult enough to sign those three guys and get it all into the cap and everybody else you've got to sign that you just talked about. But they're one of the few teams in the NFL for whom simply having that volume of liquid cash to throw in an escrow is probably an issue. The Rams don't have to think about that, right? They've got an owner bankrolled by a gazillionaire. That's not an issue. David Tepper, the Panthers, who cares? They've got money, more money than they know what to do with. The Broncos with the Waltons, they could sign 1 million of those contracts, throw all the money in escrow, it doesn't matter. They have those kinds of liquid assets. The Bengals are one of those teams for whom I think that's a reasonable question. And again, if a team comes in with an offer you can't turn down, I think that is fascinating.